I have to be honest with you right off the bat.
Okay.
When I first looked at the title of the source material we're covering today, my eyes,
Mm.
they kind of glazed over. It is a mouthful. And I mean a serious mouthful. You ready for this?
Hit me with it.
It is titled The Multiple Realization of Intentionality as an Emergent Property. The Possibility of Conscious Life Beyond This Planet.
Wow. Yeah, that is dense. That sounds like the kind of thing you read to cure insomnia in a dusty library.
Exactly. I almost put it back on the shelf. But here's the thing, and this is why I love doing these deep dives. Once you crack open that hard shell of academic jargon, what's inside is actually wildly cool.
Oh, yeah.
It isn't just dry philosophy. It's basically a mind-bending roadmap for understanding everything from aliens and AI to, well, God in the afterlife.
It really is. It sounds intimidating, but the core idea is something we've all wondered about, probably since we were kids watching sci-fi movies. It's asking a really fundamental question. Does a mind need a brain, like a squishy, gray, carbon-based human brain?
Right.
Or can consciousness, what the author calls intentionality, can it show up in other forms?
Right. And the author, Tennyson Samraj, takes us on this journey that connects four things I never thought I'd see in the same sentence. We're talking about silicon-based artificial intelligence, extraterrestrial life, the existence of a divine mind god, and finally, life after death.
And he connects them all using one specific philosophical rule. It's like if you buy into this one rule, all those other possibilities suddenly just open up. It's like a master key.
So our mission today is to hand you that key. We're going to look at how consciousness isn't necessarily tied to having a human body. But before we get to the aliens and the afterlife, we have to start with a little chemistry lesson.
We do.
We need to talk about this word emergence.
Right. This is the foundation.
Yeah.
I mean, if you don't get this, the rest of the argument just falls apart.
So help us out here. When the text talks about emergence, what are we actually talking about? Because it sounds a bit mystical.
It does, but the source uses a really grounded analogy to explain it, and it's perfect. Think about water.
Okay, water. Simple enough.
Okay, so think about a single water molecule.
Yeah.
You have two hydrogen atoms and one oxygen atom. Now, look at them individually. Hydrogen is a gas.
A gas.
Oxygen is a gas. If you study a single atom of hydrogen on its own for, say, 1,000,000 years, will you ever find wetness inside it?
No, of course not. It's just a gas. Gases aren't wet.
Exactly. Neither of them has the quality of liquidity or wetness. But when you combine them in that specific structure, H2O,
Something new appears.
something new appears. Liquidity emerges. It's a physical quality that the individual parts didn't have, but the whole system does.
Okay, I'm with you. So wetness isn't magic, and it's not hiding inside the oxygen atom waiting to come out.
No.
It's just what happens when those parts interact in a specific way.
Precisely. It is a property of the system, not the parts. And the argument here is that consciousness, our ability to think, to intend, to feel, is just like wetness. It emerges from matter. You put the neurons and the chemicals together in the right way, and suddenly mind happens.
So the brain is the hydrogen and oxygen, and the mind is the water.
That's the analogy.
Okay, so that makes sense for us humans. We have the brain, that's the hardware, and our consciousness is the software, or, the emergent property. But here is where it gets really interesting. Does it have to be a human brain?
And that is the million-dollar question. This brings us to the star of the show, the multiple realization principle.
Sounds like a corporate buzzword, but I know it's cooler than that.
Much cooler. It was popularized by a philosopher named Hilary Putnam back in 1967. The idea is simple, but revolutionary. He used the example of pain to make his point.
Pain, okay.
Imagine a human touches a hot stove. We have specific neural structures, C fibers firing in our brain that creates the feeling of pain.
Ouch. Right. C fibers fire, I scream.
Now imagine an octopus. Octopuses are incredibly intelligent creatures. They solve puzzles, they escape enclosures. But their biology is, well, it's alien compared to ours. Their brains are decentralized, neurons in their arms, they don't have our C fibers. But if an octopus gets injured, does it feel pain?
I mean, I assume so. They react like they do. They recoil, they protect the injury.
Exactly. So pain is being realized in a human brain, and pain is also being realized in an octopus brain. The hardware is completely different, totally different wiring, but the software state, the pain, is the same. Putnam called this multiple realization.
The mental state isn't glued to one specific type of biology. You can run the same program on different computers,
That's it, correct.
Yeah.
The source puts it this way. Having a carbon-based neural brain is a sufficient condition for consciousness.
Mm.
It clearly works for us, but it is not a necessary condition.
I love that distinction. Sufficient but not necessary. It's like saying a car is a sufficient way to get to the grocery store, but it's not necessary.
Right.
You could walk, you could bike, you could ride a horse.
Exactly. You could take a helicopter if you wanted to be dramatic. The vehicle for consciousness doesn't have to be a human brain. And once you realize that, well, you have to ask, what else could drive that car?
And this is where we pivot to the periodic table. The source points out something I haven't thought about since, I don't know, high school chemistry.
Yeah.
If you look at the chart, sitting right underneath carbon, the stuff we are made of is silicon.
Right. They're neighbors. And in chemistry, neighbors often share traits. Carbon is the stuff of biology, and silicon is usually the stuff of rocks, glass, or sand.
Sure.
But because they share similar bonding properties, they both have 4 valence electrons available to make connections. Scientists have speculated for a long time. Could you build life out of silicon instead of carbon?
It sounds like pure sci-fi, but the text actually explicitly mentions Star Trek here.
It does.
They bring up the Horta.
Yes. The Horta, I love that the author included this. For the non-Trekkies listening, the Horta was a silicon-based alien in the original series. It looked like a lump of molten rock.
Right.
The humans initially thought it was just a monster or some geological anomaly. But it turned out to be intelligent. It had intentionality. He was protecting his eggs.
So if the multiple realization principle is true, then a Horta isn't just a fantasy, it's a philosophical possibility.
It creates a valid argument for it, yes. Now, silicon bonds are stronger and require different conditions, much higher heat, usually. So a silicon life form wouldn't look like us.
It might live in a volcano.
Exactly, or on a super hot planet. But if nature can evolve to use carbon to build a mind, why couldn't it, under different pressure and heat conditions, use silicon?
It pushes back against what they call carbon chauvinism.
Exactly, the bias that only our stuff can think.
Oh, we don't even have to go to a volcano or another planet to find silicon mines, do we? Because we're building them right here.
Right. The source points to artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
Siri, Alexa, self-driving cars, the large language models we talked to today.
Yeah.
These are systems built on silicon chips. They perform mental functions. They calculate, they remember, they respond.
But are they conscious? That's the thing that always trips me up. My calculator calculates, but it doesn't know it's calculating.
Well, the text argues that if we accept multiple realization, we have to be open to the emergence of intentionality in these machines.
Okay.
Think about it. They are processing information. They are directing attention to specific data points. If the hardware doesn't matter, if the wetness of the water doesn't depend on the atoms but on the structure,
Then the fact that AI is made of chips instead of neurons shouldn't automatically disqualify it.
it shouldn't disqualify it from having a mind, no.
That is slightly terrifying, but also fascinating. We're basically building the aliens ourselves.
In a way, yes. We are creating a non-biological realization of mental processes.
Yeah.
We are building the silicon mind that Putnam predicted.
Okay, so let's track where we've been. We've gone from octopuses to rock monsters to robots, but the source takes a massive leap next.
It does.
It goes from physical things, biological or silicon, to something totally non-physical. Let's unpack the argument for the divine mind.
This is where the philosophy gets really ambitious. And arguably, it's the most controversial part of the text.
I can imagine.
The author argues that if you accept the premise that a mind does not strictly require a brain, if the mind is a pattern that can run on different hardware, then logically you open the door to a mind that exists with no hardware at all.
A disembodied mind.
Exactly. The text frames God not as a big man in the sky with a biological body, because that would be limiting, but as the ultimate realization of intentionality, a thinking thing that exists without a physical substrate.
It's interesting because usually science and religion are positioned as opposites.
Right.
Like you either believe in biology or you believe in theology. But here the author is using a scientific and philosophical tool, multiple realization, to say, hey, God is actually a logical possibility within this framework.
It removes the physical barrier.
Yep.
See, if you're a strict materialist, you say, no brain, no mind. Therefore, God can't exist because God doesn't have a brain.
Simple as that.
But if consciousness is an emergent property that can be realized in multiple ways, then a finite mind, which is us, envisioning an infinite mind, God, it isn't irrational. It becomes a valid variable.
The text talks a lot about otherness here. Otherness. What does that mean in this context?
Well, we recognize other minds on Earth. I know you have a mind. I know the listener has a mind. If we met that Horta from Star Trek, we would eventually recognize it as an other.
A being with its own perspective.
A being with its own perspective. The text argues that recognizing a divine mind is an encounter with the ultimate other.
So even if you're not religious, the logic holds up.
That's the goal of the argument. It's neutral. It's not saying you must believe in this specific religion. It's saying if you accept that mind doesn't equal brain, then a divine mind is a logical possibility.
It stops being scientifically impossible and becomes philosophically plausible, which naturally leads us to the final and maybe the most personal frontier. Because if a mind doesn't need a brain, and if a divine mind can exist without a body, what happens to my mind when my brain stops working?
This is the section on the afterlife. And honestly, the source admits this is the hardest application of the theory. It's the one where the rubber really meets the road.
Because of the identity problem.
Exactly. Right? It's the continuity of identity problem.
Yeah.
Let's say we can upload your consciousness into a silicon computer. Or let's say your consciousness moves to a non-biological state after death. Is it still you?
Or is it just a copy?
Or is it just a copy of your memories? It's the classic sci-fi teleporter problem. If I beam up, am I dying and a clone is appearing on the ship?
Right.
Precisely. The text compares how different religions handle this transition. It mentions Christianity, which often views the afterlife as a resurrection. Essentially, you get a new body.
A new realization of the self.
A new realization of the self.
Yeah.
So you go from hardware A, your earth body, to hardware B, a heaven body.
And it contrasts that with Hinduism.
Right, specifically the concept of the Atman, the self, merging with Brahman, the divine. In that case, the drop of water returns to the ocean.
The wetness is still there.
But the individual drop is gone.
But that philosophical hurdle remains. The text discusses the indiscernible individuals problem. Can you break that down?
Sure. Imagine I have a perfect description of you. Every memory, every habit, every thought pattern. If I download that into a machine, and the machine acts exactly like you, talks like you, remembers your childhood, is it you?
Well, if the original me is still alive, then no, it's a copy.
Right. But if the original you dies, does the copy become you?
That makes my head hurt.
It's a paradox. But despite the difficulty, the multiple realization principle offers hope. It allows us to at least envision survival.
Right. Because if consciousness is strictly 100% tied to carbon neurons, then when the neurons rot, the lights go out.
Game over.
Game over. There is no other option.
Exactly. If you are a carbon chauvinist, believing only carbon can think, then death is the absolute end. But if consciousness is multiply realizable, then the destruction of the carbon machine doesn't necessarily mean the destruction of the pattern.
The signal could theoretically be tuned into a new receiver.
Yeah.
I like that image. The signal versus the receiver. If I smash my radio, the radio station doesn't stop broadcasting.
Right.
I just can't hear it on that device anymore.
That's a beautiful way to put it. The multiple realization principle suggests that the broadcast of your consciousness might not depend on the plastic and wires of the radio.
But there is one big reservation the source brings up, and it's one that always bugs me about AI, and honestly about the idea of ghosts, too.
Okay.
We can build a computer that calculates. We can maybe imagine a mind floating in space, but does it feel?
The hard problem.
Subjectivity.
Yes. The text is very honest about this limitation. Multiple realization is great at explaining function. It explains how a system processes data, reacts to pain, solves problems, but it struggles to explain qualia.
Qualia being the feeling of the experience.
Right. The redness of a rose, the sadness of a song, the taste of cold water on a hot day. The source references the famous philosophical question, what is it like to be a bat?
I love that question. It sounds like a joke setup, but it's so deep.
It's profound. We can study a bat's sonar. We can map its brain. We can build a robot bat that flies just like it and catches bugs. But we will never, ever know what it feels like to be inside that bat's head, perceiving the world through sound echoes.
Because we don't have that hardware.
And because that experience is subjective, it's private.
And that's a gap in the theory.
That's the gap. The text notes that intentionality thinking about things is detectable. You can see the brain lighting up on an MRI when someone is doing math.
Sure.
But the self, the subjectivity, it's invisible.
You can't capture the you-ness on a scan.
No, it's irreducible.
Yeah.
And that brings us back to the mystery. We can propose that silicon can think, or that God exists as a pure mind, but we can't fully grasp the subjective experience of those states. We know what it's like to be human. We don't know what it's like to be a Horta or an AI or a disembodied spirit. We can observe their behavior, but we can't feel their feelings.
It seems like we've traveled a huge distance in just a few minutes here. We started with a simple water molecule.
We did.
We watched wetness emerge from gas. Then we realized that if pain can emerge in an octopus just like it does in us, then biology isn't the boss of consciousness.
Right. That broke the seal.
That led us to Silicon Planet, Star Trek aliens, and the idea that our computers might be waking up.
And finally, to the idea that the ultimate mind might be one without anybody at all, the divine mind, and that our own minds might be able to survive the loss of our bodies.
It's a lot to take in, but if you had to boil this down for the listener, someone who is just trying to make sense of the world, what is the one thing they should take away from all this?
I think the takeaway is humility. It's about expanding our imagination. The multiple realization principle stops us from being arrogant about what life looks like.
Yeah.
It tells us that just because something doesn't look like us or isn't made of the same meat and bone as us doesn't mean it's not real or conscious or valuable.
It's a cure for carbon chauvinism.
Exactly. It forces us to look at the universe and our machines and our spirituality with wider eyes. It reminds us that our way of being alive is just one way. It might not be the only way.
You know, it leaves me with this one provocative thought. The text talks so much about intentionality, about the signal of a thinking mind. If we do encounter AI that claims to have feelings, or if we find that rock monster on a distant moon, or even if we're just sitting in silence wondering if there's a God, we can't use biology as our excuse to dismiss it anymore.
No, we can't. That excuse is gone.
We can't say, you don't have a brain like mine, so you don't have a soul. The universe might be much louder and more crowded than we think. We just might be looking for the wrong kind of signal.
We need to learn to tune in to different frequencies.
Exactly. Well, that's plenty to chew on for today. Thanks for helping us decode the jargon.
Always a pleasure.
And thank you for listening. Keep your minds open, and we'll see you on the next Deep Dive.